This was a decade ago, but this was the formation of how I discovered this was a widespread problem.
They were losing 50% of their sales in a month.
Is this a data source that we can find within an OEM and turn it into something digital that we can distribute and put on our platform? That's the most consistent thing that we're doing.
Where could data be really deployed to improve profitability, efficiency?
I mean, if you're a professional buyer, which is a fleet manager, that's your life. It's just a queue of people wanting to sell you stuff.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Drivetime Podcast. I'm joined in the studio this week by Lloyd Streton, who is the Chief Technology Officer for ROI Automotive. You're going to be, by the end of this episode, very well acquainted with all of the work that they're doing in the fleet sector to make it easier for fleet decision makers to buy, procure, manage, live with their vehicles. So it's a great episode. Stay tuned. It's really good to have you in the studio.
Well, thanks for having me very much, Jacqui. It's brilliant to be here.
So Lloyd, just talk a little bit about the work that you do at ROI and how you kind of got into automotive.
Yeah, brilliant. So ROI, for those who've never heard of us before, we work to help OEMs maximize their fleet sales opportunities. So that's really about bringing on board new customers for them or helping them retain and maximize the customers that they've got in fleet.
Yeah.
To do that, we have a few different solutions in our portfolio. Primarily technology, supported by human experts, and then marketing services to help them grow and advance those interactions they have day to day. So we now work with 32 OEMs in the UK, 7 across Europe, 50 plus of the FN50 leasing companies, 500 plus retailers, 1,500 fleet managers. So yeah, we're quite pervasive in our contacts and connections across the industry, probably quite unknown to many people, though, quite frankly.
Just sort of going back a little bit to ROI and its evolution. So the founder, Nigel, I know kind of noticed there was a kind of a gap in how OEMs were able to set quality appointments and then follow them up. That was the original birth of how do we help you invest your time to get the right customers in front of you when you're positioning your product to them as an OEM. So just talk a little bit about kind of the birth of the business and then how it's kind of now your ROI Automotive. So you're very strictly sort of focused on automotive only, and lots of other things have come out of the back of that.
Yeah. So Nigel really spotted a real clear opportunity in the market. We were already working together pre-ROI. So my Nigel's story started probably 4-ish years before the birth of ROI, where we both worked at a sales training and marketing company that was in the automotive sector. So we worked very much with Honda and Citroen, doing product launches, sales training, spent some time in the Honda Institute working with their different delegates across their organizations. Probably the culmination, though, with Stephen Covey presenting in a room to the final part of the course, seeing him on an overhead projector, writing his slides out as he went and preparing it. Most phenomenal things with dealer principals, interacting with each other, active listening. So we were in that business together. We took on a massive contract with MG Rover. MG Rover almost doubled, maybe tripled the size of the business at the time. It was a young business. We had to spend quite a lot of money investing in all the supporting services, cars, phones, laptops, everything you needed. MG Rover unfortunately went bust, and the impact was the business couldn't survive. But out of that business grew 4 other businesses, and Nigel's has been the most successful that I'm aware of out of that formation. So when he left there, he very much looked at the automotive experience he'd got. So we were in dealerships, working with salespeople, understanding that while active, salespeople weren't always proactive. You know, they're active as someone comes into the dealership, but how do I build a relationship? How do I go and find new customers? So at the culmination, we were really helping MG Rover find those customers and bring them to dealerships. Nigel took the next leap, which was, actually, you've got exactly the same problem, probably on the B2B side. So we're building relationships with individual customers, great, but fleets have got a wide range and impact. So how do we help an OEM build that relationship with the large fleet customers? And for most OEMs, that means 100 plus fleet. So how do I get in front of them and show the USPs of my brand? What is it that's going to make us succeed with you as a customer? And Nigel spotted that. He understood the salespeople great once they're with a customer, again, active, but in the proactive nature, it was all about how do we help them be proactive. So that's where the business began, that whole piece of can we get people in front of people consistently, so the right quality standards so that if we send someone from a head office out to visit a customer, they're ready to see you, they're qualified, they've got a need, it's going to happen on that date and time. So that was a real change in the industry. But what followed quite quickly after that was, it's great to have that engagement at the beginning of the journey, but then, well, how do you support the salesperson to do all the things that they need to do to make sure that they've got the demonstration vehicles in place, to make sure they're supporting the fleet customer through the different parts of the sales process, putting in place the different discount levels they might need to buy volume products. All of these things were extra activities that ROI effectively then began to support them with. So we moved from prospecting into business centers, and then 10 years into the journey, Nigel got back in touch with me and said, look, from my experience looking at the industry, technology is sort of the next frontier for what we need to do. Lots of our clients are getting to the point of their systems that work really well for retail, we're struggling to make work for fleet, or we're just underserved in some massive way in the way that we do what we do. So I joined the business and spent the first few years really trying to understand fleet. I knew retail. I'd got some financial services experience. I'd been at Capital One and Experience, so I understood credit and finance and clarification and security. I understand all the big ticket items, but fleet was nuanced. It's like retail but amplified, isn't it? That individual retail experience, well, there's hundreds of those all factored into a fleet manager's decision about, is this the right brand to work with? Or is this the right brand to add to the existing list of brands I'm working with? So the complexities just were amplified, and it was quite difficult to actually work through the process that it isn't a one-to-one experience in fleet. So
it's a one-to-many, isn't it?
One-to-many, exactly right. It's there are one-to-many in retail, but you're transacting with a person normally. It's a dealership, it's a broker, it's somewhere, and that interface gets you the vehicle, gets you the funding. Brilliant. In fleet, well, you've got to have an experience with a fleet manager, but it's leased. So you've got to have an agreement and a communication mechanism with the leasing company. Well, actually, then there's a supplying dealer, and then there's a preferred dealer for service and after sales. Is this a package product? So all of a sudden, there's this set of people made involved in the decision making, which make it just more complicated, amplified on the scale. And that's really where the OEMs have really leveraged our ability to help them get the points in their process that they need, optimizing, cost reducing, making it more effective and efficient. And that's the big part of the puzzle. So I joined in that part of the world where we went, okay, let's start at the beginning. Do we understand the customers? Do we understand the data set? Do we understand how we make salespeople effective?
If you get it right, like I could, sell a great product to you and you buy it, but if you're responsible for thousands of vehicles, it's really critical I don't get it wrong. It's like really critical that I get the price point right, the financial implications are all kind of locked into that. So fleet professionals are responsible for making fairly meaty decisions, and you've got to get those things right, haven't you? So
yeah, okay. If you put yourself in the fleet manager's shoes, and it's like a consumer, you can't really generalize what a fleet manager is. There are fleet managers that this is a very small part of their job, and they may be running a simple salary sacrifice scheme. It may be majorly managed by some third party on their behalf. On the other end of the scale, you've got professional fleet management teams within organizations that are running 1,000+ commercial vehicle fleet, and then a hundreds of vehicle job need fleet. They may be service engineers going out, and then they've got their perk cars, which are their salespeople, and then they've got a salary sacrifice scheme. Yeah. And when you get to that level of complexity, all of those challenges in the procurement process start to become very clear. It's, is this the right price for us? But actually, simply, is this the right brand for us? Does this brand represent us when our people are in that vehicle going to somewhere? And that's what you start to see. There's a reason, if you look at estate agents in London, they drive a particular brand of vehicle because it aligns with what that business is trying to represent themselves of. So you've got is the brand right? But then you've got all of the tertiary things. Is this environmentally aligned to what we're trying to do as a business? Do they have the right credentials and public facing speaking? So an American brand has had some issues recently with some fleets where their outspoken views have impacted how they feel about buying that product and having it on their fleets. All of those things come into play. And then probably as you roll it all the way through, it then becomes, not only is the product right, is the price right, is it available when I need it? Is the functionality of it in line with what I need? Commercial vehicles are particularly strong on that. Is the dimensions in the back big enough to get the racking in I need to do the job I need for the service technician to go and be visible on the road? There's lots involved in that part of the process that's unknown. And then it's where it touches the main interface point. So the driver. The driver is then in the vehicle and has an opinion and view of every part. How was the delivery? How was the after sales and support in the dealership? If they've got an issue with the vehicle, has it been resolved and updated? All of those pieces of the puzzle come into play for a fleet manager. And all of it is touched by so much complexity. And I think that's where we've evolved over time as a business, because we're trying to help all of those parties get the information they need at the point they need in the journey where they need it. And every one of them is doing a great job independently. If you look at an OEM, look at a leasing company, you look at the retailers and the fleet manager, they're all doing great jobs. They don't have the information right now at all times to help them make their lives easier. No. And that's what we've spent the remainder of my career at ROI doing. We've been building the platforms that enable us to do that, to surface the information from an OEM that the fleet manager needs right now, equally surfacing it to the leasing companies and making it available to the retailers.
Yeah. Because that's the thing, is I suppose the leasing companies are, again, a critical part of it. Some fleets they will outright purchase their fleet and they will have the residual value sitting on their own balance sheet. Others choose to have the residual value sitting on somebody else's balance sheet, and they will just literally pay for that asset as they need it. So you're kind of leasing it as you use it. But there are a number of different... The other thing we talked about as well, Lloyd, and I think we'll come on to this, is how you surface all of those different terms. That all of the OEMs will have a different set of terms with the end user company, and then a different set of... So the leasing provider is then ingesting all of this data that's not just the same for everyone. It's unique to every single buyer. It's just, it's a complex challenge to solve, which really technology is primed to do.
Yeah, perfect. And that's exactly it. If the pre-world before the set of solutions we have, if you think about, there would be a department within a leasing company that are just receiving a stream of information in a variety of formats, sometimes in email, sometimes as a delivered file via an FTP or equivalent service, but it's all different. A schedule that's not maintained, and it puts a lot of onus on the leasing company to consume that information and make it work. And that means lots of people doing exceptionally repetitive jobs, but importantly, it's time. It's, if I'm delivering data and information to a leasing company from an OEM's point of view, the customer, we've shared between us and the customer, this is what you're getting. The leasing company needs to know it this instant and be able to quote a vehicle today to make it work. Not possible before. So what we've done is effectively standardize the way all OEMs bring that data together through our platform. We've consumed a variety of formats from a variety of different systems. So some is custom out of our own platform agreements engine to generate those discounts. Some we'll consume from Salesforce instances, or a lot of cases it's from SAP or Siebel back office systems that haven't been touched in a long time. They've been sat there 10, 15 years ago. They did the job, but the market's moved. And I think that's probably one of the main problems that we see our own clients with, is some of their business strategy is limited by the technology they've got in place. They can't action some of the decisions they want as quickly as they want because of that. And that's what we've been helping our customers understand. And a recent client that's just moved over to us used to lose 50% of their sales in the month where they processed all their major terms. Each year, they could track the activity. They'd bring their salespeople together. They'd operate all the different discount changes. They'd add the new models on. They'd verify if each piece of information was correct. That was human time. And that was expensive salespeople time that they weren't sat with customers, actually building relationships, presenting the value of the vehicles, working with them as a strategic partner. So we've taken all that away, and now it happens in a few hours each month by a back office team. It's just all automated for them.
So just explain, I think that's really important. Just explain out what you mean by they were losing 50% of their sales in a month.
Perfect. So sales, a lot in fleet is driven by salesperson activity, working closely with a fleet manager to drive sales incentivization. So they're working with fleet managers, physically meeting them, digitally meeting them, building the relationships, making sure, most importantly, that their vehicles are in the right group of vehicles to be bought by them. So
yeah. So you've got bandings, haven't you? I suppose it's like, depending, you mentioned like perk cars or salary sacrifice or exec level, or you'd have like the salesperson with the rep car that never had the oil change. They're kind of those stereotypes.
Yeah.
But you have those vehicles in bandings, so price bandings based on your car allowance.
Perfect. Exactly right. And if you go up or down those bands, you either get a higher value vehicle or you can get volume. And OEMs want to be able to maneuver vehicles across those. They also want to work really closely with the leasing companies in a strategic partnership to bulk offer vehicles. So they want to be able to say, we've got this volume that's come out of production. We need to offer you an incentivized price. But all of that's human relationship conversation that needs to happen. And as soon as you go, actually, what I want you to do is I want you to return to the office, and you're responsible in your area, 300 customers, let's say in fleet. I need you to review every one of their contracts. And I need you to update every single one to the new contract. And that's where you lose 50% of the sales, is because you take all your sales guys off the road for 2 weeks for them to process all of that information.
And let's be honest, salespeople aren't really good at admin. I mean, it's not their favourite thing.
I would say, I think that's always one of those wide things. Salespeople are not good at admin. I think they know their skills are stronger in relationships. So the admin just falls to the bottom of the things that they prioritise. I think I've met some really phenomenally great administrators, but I've met some phenomenally great sales interaction people that have got no interest in that.
Yeah, it just turns you cold a bit. I think if you're a people person, you've then got to process loads of data, you kind of go, it's going to delay doing it. I spoke to a colleague last week who delayed doing her expenses for a year. I'm like, what? How could you do that? She didn't want to do it. I mean, in the end, she had to because it was year end. But it's like, how could you delay it for that long? Because you just don't want to do the admin. So yeah, it's
priorities, isn't it?
Yeah,
and people know what your strengths are. And I think that was a clear example of, let's not play to their strengths, let's bring them inside and do all the stuff that they can't do because no one else can do it. And I say, well, let's replace that with a system where we can tell it the logic of what's the rules? What's the rules for all these customers? Do we want to consider only customers have been buying this year, or customers have been buying for the last 3 years? Or actually, is this customer seems to be growing, their fleet size seems to be growing in the system. So we probably should need to think about different discount levels. So let's automate that logic, present it to them in a way that says, is this what you want to do? Do you want to check it? Brilliant, check it. And we then manage the distribution. So we send out all the communications to everybody involved the instant that it's ready. And the other big change is you can then start to get ahead. So brands can then start to think in November, well, we're going to have a new release of terms in January. Let's do it in November. Let's think about what we want to do, get it all ready and press the button ready. So January 1st comes, it's distributed out to the world without us touching anything. Yeah. And there's just lots of those bits of the puzzle where it just takes, and I think all the stuff in technology just takes someone to take a keen interest in the area and think, can we apply some logic to it that saves people time? And for us, it only really actually made sense when we had the scale of OEMs we're working with. If you're going to do this on a one-by-one OEM, it's really hard to justify the cost benefit. You go, we're going to invest all this to get this return, and we might
for
not
one
see,
OEM.
Yeah, for one OEM. Yeah, and we may not see it back. So we see OEMs building some of this stuff themselves. They'll put it in something like a revenue cloud in Salesforce, or they'll put it inside a back office system like SAP. And it can do what they hoped it would do the first time. And then each time thereafter, it just becomes a more painful experience. And they don't want to continue to invest in it. So we took the model of, let's make it a software as a service and let's just evolve the product. And our commitment is we will evolve the product every year to do new things that we know that you've asked us to do, but we know you need based on the market. We know that, wouldn't it be great, instead of January the 1st coming and we release new terms, to have a holding place and let everybody know in December, all the leasing companies know there's new terms coming for this customer and these are what they're likely to be. Well, that means for the leasing companies, they don't start removing customers off their database come January the 1st. They're already going, actually, no, we already know there's new terms, so let's not worry about it. And there's just tens of those little things that just are uncovered and discovered through the journey and process of just trying to solve someone's challenge and problem. So, yeah.
All of these rules that are repeated can be coded in to something that automates it for you. So it's like auto sum in an Excel spreadsheet. mic times, whatever. But it's like saying, I want you to do this job in that cell and tell me this information. And it's coded in, which is kind of, that's your superpower, isn't it? That you kind of do all of that rules-based logic, deciphering it for me. If the terms are going to change by this percentage over these vehicles in these, it's all coded in and you just get the updates automatically. I think that's the bit that can just change so much for the better for everybody. It's kind of having to ingest all of that data rather than being historically so reactive and so manual with millions of spreadsheets. I mean, like the rate books that used to come out. I remember people working in leasing up would have to get around with the rate books. It's gone from a book to an Excel spreadsheet, but now it just still needs to be use tech, use automated pricing to release the updates so it actually gets distributed. Who ingests, we say it's distributed, who's on the receiving end of that distribution? How do you kind of get that out and where does that land?
Perfect. So it goes into 3 buckets, but the first main place is for leasing portal for the leasing industry. So we have all of the major leasing companies in the platform every single day consuming tens of thousands of terms. So I think we did 250,000 downloads in last quarter of the year. And each of those have got thousands of rows of data of different discounts, all coded down to individual, normally cap codes in the UK, JATO in Europe, to standardize again. If you see it at the leasing company's point of view, instead of having manufacturer product codes or manufacturer model descriptions, no, let's standardize on the industry agreed format. Let's give it to you and you can consume it. So then everybody's talking about the same concept. So yeah, leasing portal is where they consume it. They do have an API option. So we have a number of leasing companies we're working through the pilot phase now on consuming at the moment it's live. So what that will mean for them, instead of distribution of a set of terms, which they will then download and process. So they have robo-loaders effectively on their side to consume the CSV information. They will query the API live. So particular leasing company we're working with now is building it. So the moment they're querying to quote a customer, it's going to check our API for the latest set of terms. Again, it's just decreasing all of those slowness, and all that slowness really just impacts the customer.
Yeah, of course.
So the fleet manager is waiting for the right piece of information to be in place. So if we get it to the leasing companies the instant the OEMs released it, and we give the fleet managers a copy of that at the same time, and any retailers who also need to see it all through the same format, everybody has that piece of information they need when they want it. So yeah, the terms are one part of that offering. We do also deliver a variety of other information that they all need to make decisions on. So lead times. We have all the lead times for all the OEMs in a consistent format delivered in that same place. So we begin to curate the noise. I think that's probably a good way of looking at it. In today's world, we are hammered on email, quite frankly, of updates from 1 million people about 1 million things. How anyone manages that in a professional buyer's capacity. I mean, I have a limited amount of buying capacity in my role, but that's enough. I mean, if you're a professional buyer, which is a fleet manager, that's your life. It's just a queue of people wanting to sell you stuff. Then you've got OEM produced information, which is their website, which is a variety of information that some of it's really applicable to fleet. Some of it is loosely applicable. Some have really great fleet information. Some don't really, and lock it behind doors. How do you get that in a format that the fleet manager knows and trusts? In Fleet Gateway, and we've got some really good topics really from the fleet managers have told us about, where they'll go into rooms with their stakeholders. So they'll be in a meeting. One was with his CEO. They were discussing the commercial vehicle they needed for the new load type they're having, the new service they're offering. And he pulled up the different specs of the vehicles he was looking at. It was, here's the spec and load weight of these selection of vans. Which one is most applicable for what we need to do? Doesn't have to load up all of the websites, which are all inconsistent in the way they do it. And I think what we've really appreciated is our OEMs have really supported the concept of what does their customer need? Because they have all this information and they've invested in saying, look, we understand if we can make it in a format that's right for the OEM, right for the fleet manager, we can put it in a place where the fleet manager can consume all that they want and we get a better reaction from them. It means that we can spend the time supporting them rather than them chasing us. And that's what a lot of what we help really for the OEMs was the fleet manager needs information and they need it reasonably quickly. So if they want to know a production status update on vehicle A, they're going to phone someone or email them, and that OEM representative is with another customer. Probably they're already talking about some other things. So that's going to wait. So the day passes. And then sometimes they might be out in many meetings around the country. Friday then comes, doesn't it? Admin day. And we get all the admin together and we do all the jobs that the sales guys at least like to do. All of that we try and take away. It's trying to make it so that it's just automated in a place where they need it.
I think as well, the switch to EV went to fleet first because there was a taxable benefit for it to do so. So actually they've also had to be very informed about all of those different fleet data points that, again, you've got emissions and range and you've got all of these different things you've got to bring into your decision making. So I suppose you're advising fleet decision makers and they're coming to you with all of their questions. How you access that is critical in terms of speed of transaction.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into it, really. If I look at the reason that the first agreement situation was put together, it was because I sat opposite a business center running for a particular OEM who is the leading OEM in agreements, and they always have been really in terms of their perception in the market. And I saw all of their people, this is a long time ago, come out of the office and start stuffing envelopes. They were stuffing envelopes ready to send terms out. This was a decade ago, but this was the formation of how I discovered this was a widespread problem. I saw them build the dynamic spreadsheet. So they were coding one spreadsheet, copying it across, labeling it for this leasing company, labeling for the leasing company. And it was just that realization. I never would have probably seen it or experienced that pain if I hadn't seen our own teams do it. And then understanding, what would you like this world to look like? And how do we reframe this into something that's useful for us as a business? Because it makes us more efficient and effective. But it's a customer problem. A customer receiving a letter in the post is nice in a way. You know, that's weirdly marketing is moving back towards some of those things now for the touch, but it's actually not that useful in the world. And as you said about the rest of the services, exactly the same. Our business centers are processing requests day in, day out. And we look at those requests and go, okay, is this a data source that we can find within an OEM and turn it into something digital that we can distribute and put on our platform? That's the most consistent thing that we're doing. But we're spending also a lot of time with fleet managers. We're interviewing them and understanding what is it that really makes an OEM succeed with you? What are some challenges you have? How do we help you explore that? And that expands it to a topic we were talking around is even to the retailer. So some of their retailer experiences, how a retailer is working with them impacts that overall fleet journey. So are their salary sacrifice customers getting an experience in the dealer? Are they able to test drive a vehicle? Are they treated as a customer, or are they largely ignored?
The retailer, the franchise retailer, is an extension from a consumer's point of view of the brand they represent. If the logo is above the door, that's who I'm giving my money to ultimately. And that experience can be inconsistent. And we've seen OEMs try to tackle that with going direct to consumer, having their own leasing company, doing different things because they're trying to ultimately get a good experience for a consumer. But when you walk in, if you're a fleet driver, and I know obviously we've talked a lot about fleet managers, but I've had the privilege of being given a company car at different times in my career, and you are so excited. You've got a new car and you go and choose it and you walk in and the retailer almost tells you to sling your rock because they think you're not going to buy it from them. Now, you can actually put them down as a preferred dealer, but you struggle to get a test drive. And I think, so if you want to look at the customer, the end customer experience, and we talked about, like, if you lose an OEM off your choice list, you lose a lot over many years. So that experience is really critical, that the person experiencing the vehicle and the brand, regardless of how it's funded, because if it's salary sacrifice, it's leased, but it's your money that's being routed through a leasing provider. So it's still funded in a different way, but you're still the customer. So what can we do to kind of fix that experience? And we've obviously solved it all, in our spare time. So we know what we think is possible by just connecting up data points. You kind of go, well, why wouldn't you just send the information through and actually make it easier and give them a great experience? So I think there are lots of really good things to do. How close are you to drivers, Lloyd, and how much feedback do you get? Because you said you speak to fleet managers to understand those pain points. How much of that do you hear coming back through? Yeah,
quite a lot, really. In fact, we've got a really good example very recently where a fleet manager had an issue with a vehicle. And it wasn't his issue. It was an issue reported by one of his senior guys who was in a particular brand. It'd been brought in for a service. There were some parts that were unavailable, distributed from another country. And it just sort of went into this little bit of a black hole. From the driver's point of view, they were giving a courtesy car and then a hire car, and they were kept on the road. So the on the road experience was there, but it took a fleet manager to reach out to their brand representative. And then you go, well, who is my brand representative? Well, I speak to the dealer, and the dealer's like, well, we don't really deal with the fleet. It's now sort of held by head office, and head office go, no, we've got it with the parts in order. And for a fleet manager, it's really hard to get to the bottom of, how do I solve this problem? And unfortunately, sometimes when that problem becomes too hard to solve, the answer is probably not going to buy from your brand anymore. I'm probably going to remove your brand from policy and go with one of the other brands with which my drivers are telling me less problems about. I'm not, no OEM has got this perfect in terms of the experience, but a fleet manager is going to try and minimize the disruption, because if you've got 1,000 drivers driving vehicles, I've got to be worrying about the new vehicles I'm bringing on fleet and making sure that we're running and they're optimized. The less time I can have drivers at my door as a fleet manager giving me challenges and issues, I'm going to try and do that. And I'm going to try and pick brands that can support me with that. So that end-to-end service experience is critical. I think going back though to what happens when a company car driver enters a dealership and a dealership is dealing with them in their world of it, I think the dealership is doing everything in their power almost. I look at a dealership and go, you're incentivized to sell vehicles. This is a customer that might not be a customer to you. They go into a different category. Yeah. And that might be because the way the OEM or the leasing relationship hasn't incentivized that to work in a better way. And I think if trying to look holistically at this problem and go, how do you make it really good for sales sack drivers and company car drivers? It's probably a coordinated affair. It's coordinated between the OEM finding the right incentive measures, which direct to consumer was a mechanism, but I'm not sure that's the only way. I'm pretty sure that they can find better ways of incentivizing that. Yeah, it was, and that was challenging for a number of reasons, because actually you still require a retailer to deal with the consumer. The customer wants to come in and look at something or test drive something or speak to a human. So we know that there's going to be, and there is, a move towards, and we'll come on and talk about AI in a minute, because, the one critical thing about AI and having it work for you is access to the data points that you need the AI to refer to and to glean from. So if you want the AI to help you refine down your choices, you talked about bandings and actually it'd be good to maybe delve into that. How far are we away from using AI to start to help those decision makers decide by, how is it kind of in process, on the roadmap kind of? Yeah. So I think AI for me, it's a little bit, it still feels like the early .com days. We're still very much in that. We remember those. Google appeared. I mean, the younger listeners tune out now, but when Google appeared, it was like this new great thing. But it took quite a while, even for the basics of us to all understand how to even query it to get a result that made any sense to us. That predates all of the optimization they did and all the different ways you have to game it. AI for me is in exactly that same sort of territory at the minute. It is very good at some very specific things, but I don't think we're in a model yet that many people have got confidence in it to do what humans do. Now, the way we look at it slightly differently is what it is good at is looking at historic things in data sets and then trying to say what might happen. So what we're looking at is, okay, what does the discount ratios that we're offering impact the sales that we're seeing? So you can do it. It's a loose correlation. It's not perfect. And that's why you have to model it and test it and see if you can give indications on actually what would have been the benefit of an extra 0.5% here based on the model data. So of hundreds of thousands of vehicles sold, what is the likelihood that it would made an impact? So that's what we're working through on that space. On the other side, we're trying to use AI to help the users of our platforms find the data they want quicker, because we've now got reasonably large data sets of discounts and lead times and product informations and changes. How do we drive them into the right answer to their question quicker? So we're using it as a consolidation device effectively for right now. We do, though, in the wider business, have started to use it as an extension to our customer support and services. So we've got an international pilot happening in Europe now about using it to gather information from OEM websites, supporting it with all of our pre-hire experience on the human point of view, interacting, and then delivering multi-channel AI across WhatsApp and web chat. So we're very much using it. I think I'm 18 months to 24 months to really finding the thing that accelerates that journey. And like everyone has done, the evolution of what was ChatGPT over the last 2 years has been ridiculous for most people.
Yeah.
But most people who've used it that long can find all the problems with it quite quickly, all the issues and challenges, the hallucinations. But we're getting closer. I think that's the reality for us. And it is very much part of the roadmap for everything that we're doing as a useful tool. I
think the way that we're building it out as kind of new domains that we're kind of built, or new products come out, we're kind of almost having it as part of that. And then it will evolve with those products. So we're not just kind of like putting it into everything as a blanket, because I think you've got to start to build out where's the value for this experience layer, where's the value for this part of the journey. And what are those? I really like the way that you sort of say using it for modeling and predictability, because I think that's the one thing that there's a huge amount of guesswork, and there still will be a huge amount of guesswork because you can only model based on what you already know, and who knows how many curveballs are coming at us in the next 12 months. We just don't know. They're constant at the moment. So I think that's it's good to kind of take the data and start to query in a way that allows you to make some informed decisions about what's coming next. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I think where we are in a year's time, Lloyd. That'll be quite an interesting one. So we've talked a little bit about leasing portal, which is kind of how you're standardizing things like OEM discounts. I'm just going to recap because I think it's really important. We've covered quite a lot of technical stuff in an area that we don't normally cover on this podcast. So I think it's quite useful just to think about why you're doing the things that you're doing, how you're removing things like manual effort and the delays in taking people out of the business for like 2 weeks at a time. And then you mentioned Fleet Gateway, which is that Fleet Gateway is that kind of engagement with fleet decision makers. So that's a portal that they can access to find things like servicing. And we were looking at what would the use cases be if you've got a driver on the road, how could you connect up other secondary data into like our space, for example, to look at, wouldn't it be great if you've got a driver, uptime is critical for fleets because they're moving humans or products or they're delivering things. So they've got logistics and they've got them, they have to be always on, so uptime critical. So Fleet Gateway supports the fleet decision makers who have got people out on the roads all the time. And also we talked about pricing, lifecycle pricing, lead times, issues, that kind of thing, which is, again, really critical. So knowing if you've got vehicles on order, when the heck are they going to actually arrive? And you've got to put somebody in another vehicle until that thing does arrive. So you've just got a lot of logistical challenges. And then the other thing that I think we talked about, or we've scratched really, is that how you're managing things like the agreements, the discounts, which are so complex. And that's where I think when you've got lots of different layers of data, having it in a place where you can start to build automation is going to be game changing for anybody in that space, or running fleets. I think we've seen, and I don't know whether you've got the data on this, but more people have used things like salary sacrifice to lease EVs rather than take the risk themselves, because actually it's like, oh, it's a new thing, I'm not quite sure, I'm going to lease it and just try and see. So I think that's probably led to, I don't know, what's been your experience of seeing that and the shift towards EVs?
Yeah, so for us, it's not been as clear cut, because a fleet manager is taking an ICE product, and that's great, and they've got a choice on a BEV product in their portfolio, BEV products, whatever they need to be in the mix. But we're seeing Salsac as this new frontier, really, of really more new drivers being brought into the fleet space that weren't already provided a company car. In general, we're seeing a lot more come into there. And interestingly, we're seeing actually in the old model that a fleet manager would normally choose a single funder because they can manage the relationship, the after sales, and all the pieces of the puzzle. They're bringing in sometimes a secondary Salsac provider to operate a completely different scheme, which brings complexity because I've now got to source two different people. But that transition, like you say, has de-risked a lot of the BEV space, really, of how do I try these products and how do I minimize really that, I'll probably roll back 2-3 years, that low range delivery problem, which I think has been, if I look at the main caps, when people were talking around 200 real world miles, it's probably not enough for most fleet managers to take a risk on or make a change for. 300 is starting to become, okay, interesting, but we've now got OEMs with 400 and 500. I think that's the big marking point for where fleet managers will be really comfortable from a service and usability point of view, how that works on finance residuals, that's a different set of permutations, but that feels like it's steadied a little. I think a lot of the residual pain has probably been felt from the leasing companies, and I think a few took quite a problematic phase through dealing with all of that changing in RV pricing, which I personally felt for, like it was, they were trying to do the right thing, and sometimes it doesn't swing in their favour.
No. I mean, there was some real kind of inconsistency, wasn't there, where the prices would just kind of like drop, and Tesla didn't help because they just kept changing all their pricing. And so it had a real impact on everything else.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
eyes.
Right. So brilliant. That's a really good example of some of the problems we see with that broad scale market pricing. So a Tesla, who traditionally, I mean, recently they have changed their model in the UK about the way they approach discounting, but traditionally it was a fixed price. Everybody got the same price. And that's great in one way. It's very easy to upset an awful lot of customers really quickly that the price changed on the following day after vehicles are purchased. So some of the advantages of the traditional way OEMs work in terms of managing discounts and managing the distribution of those through a terms process has helped a lot of OEMs weather that storm quite a bit better in terms of PR, vehicle perception, and driver confusion, because a driver doesn't want, if you work in a business, to go and have a price for a vehicle today and it changes tomorrow and it changes the next day. They need a stability. When you're making a decision, you're coming to the end of an existing contract, you've got 3 months out, 6 months out, and you're starting to think about the new vehicle. You don't want to be, your job is now to watch prices every single day to make sure that you can still afford that vehicle and it still stayed within your band of allowance or your monthly self-sacrifice.
It's a big decision.
Yeah.
You're not just, I mean, I got annoyed. It's like as you talk, I'm like, there was over Christmas, I bought a cosmetic brand that I have bought repeatedly. And I thought I actually went into the shop. I've always bought it online. I went into the shop. I was like, is there a Black Friday deal coming out? Are you likely to announce one? Because I've actually made it to your shop. I've come to London and I've specifically come to see what the experience is like. It wasn't that great, I have to say. And then within 3 days, and I bought, and they announced the Black Friday thing, and I was absolutely raging. I was like, really? They wouldn't tell me that there was a Black Friday thing. Meanwhile, I've now handed over my cash in a shop. I would have been furious if it had happened on a vehicle sale, because it's thousands, isn't it, over the life of the vehicle? Significant.
Yeah, you've committed to it. It's 3 years normally of whatever this sum of money is.
Yeah.
And buyer's remorse can kick in quite quick.
Buyer's remorse.
Yeah, exactly right.
I wonder how much buyer's remorse. I mean, yeah, buyer's remorse is real, especially when they've changed the bloody price the day after. That is really annoying. Yeah, that is bad. That is bad. You mentioned RVs, Lloyd, and I don't know, we've never really talked about disposals, but is that something you, as a business, see or get involved with or influence?
We don't. Globally, we do touch parts of it in our interactions. It's not something that we spend a lot of time currently involved in.
Yeah.
So that's one way of answering the question. The other way is there are parts of our business that have been getting quite close to RVs in auctioning and looking at the disposal of vehicles for certain brands in certain ways. It's not core to us for sure. We probably see ourselves very much in the sales and after sales world of conversation, not so much RVs, not so much then disposal over time.
I'm thinking of all of that data that you're holding and the vehicles that you're seeing through the business centres I think all of that data that you're holding is quite important and has an opportunity. For me, I'm going to go, wow, wouldn't it be great if you could be part of that disposal process? Or we sort of look at what's the optimum time to dispose of vehicles based on residual values, based on the data sets that we have around transactional data. So, and also there are other sources of data about where consumers are looking online in marketplaces that you could then aggregate to enable optimum disposal of approved used or a used channel. So I think that's the thing for me, is where could data be really deployed to improve profitability, efficiency, speed, all of those things. I think that's the bit where you look for, as you've described, you can see the pain points physically in front of you with people stuffing envelopes. Like, could you apply the same analogy to every other part of the industry? Yes, you can. We can see people in their retailers, like the equivalent of stuffing envelopes by keying things into all the different systems that have evolved in that business over time. So actually, the big drive for us now is, how do you just make that so much leaner, and how can we automate it? And I wonder, we're looking at, in a number of markets, how much of this industry will be automated, because headcount's expensive.
Yeah, and it's cost pressure is always downwards, isn't it? It's not. There's never the luxury of we can put prices up. There's too much competition in the marketplace, quite frankly, for that possibility to ever come back to us now.
You can't put the prices up because there's so many new entrants bringing the prices down and making it so price competitive. Actually, it's critical and before
there was an easier trade-off, which is the brand proposition from OEMA was that strong. The prices didn't matter too much. I think I'm not saying they didn't matter, but there wasn't enough variation to make a big impact. But the new entrants are so much more cost effective that it can turn the heads of some decision makers in the process. It can make a difference. I think the balance of that, though, is they've got to look after that vehicle for the next 3 years. And what does that mean? And for a consumer, that risk is easier to bear than someone buying 100 of those vehicles. And that's just to be weighed up and assessed. But each brand, I think, has got a place, but every brand is focused on, how do I do this more efficiently? How do I make this more effective? And importantly, I think lots of them are asking the question of, how do I do this in the way that the customer wants?
Yes.
That's the other part of the puzzle. It's great to focus on cost reduction, but actually spending time speaking to the end users. And I think probably the most interesting thing that I've experienced through all the work that we've done is not actually the technology or the improvement. It's the turning around of an individual who's got a system delivered to them that they never asked for. They genuinely never asked to have this, with a load of functionality in that they might not have wanted, and have used it, and then feedback, this has changed my role.
Yeah.
Even in a small metric percentage, this has changed my role. And interestingly, we did a dealer conference, which also had a load of their suppliers on for a national conference in January. And we did a section of workshops. They brought them in and we presented how this particular brand was going to use the Fleet Gateway product. I had an individual at the front who looked quite disengaged. I thought perhaps we weren't appealing to him, or it was probably not his section of the workshops he was interested in. We got to the question bit and he just put his hand up and he says, "Oh, how can we help you get more brands on?" I was like, well, anything you can do to talk to OEMs about how this works would be fantastic for us, and just explain the benefit things. Is I use it with this other brand group and it's brilliant. And he said that at the beginning of the questions thing. It's a really heartwarming thing. And that's probably been the thing that's been the shock of, we've been able to change a load of people's roles and functions by making their lives easier, and they haven't had to pay for it. An OEM is invested in making their lives easier. And I think it's collaborative as well. So actually, years ago, you know this because I worked with you, then it was like syndicated research. Let's all learn how to make it better. And we did a piece of research then about how do company car drivers' decisions differ from that of a retail customer, or what are the important points in the company car drivers' process. And we were approached by one OEM and we syndicated it with 8 others. And actually they all invested in knowing how to satisfy company car drivers. Test drive was really critical. So actually... It still is.
It still is. Yeah. It's like, but even if it's not your money and they don't really care about it, they'll just get in and drive it. You still have to try it on for size, and you've got to try it on for life, make sure that your life can fit in the thing. So I think that's quite important. And as you switch towards EVs, there are other factors that are going to decide your experience will be different and your mileage is different. So I think they're all really critical. So in terms of Fleet Gateway, because I think that's it's such a nice way to kind of wrap up the episode, is like, what are the things that have been most valuable for those corporate buyers that Fleet Gateway gives them that has changed? You said it's like changed their world, and can we get more people on it?
Yeah, it's consistency. So it's very rare that a fleet manager only buys one brand.
Of course.
There's the exclusions, obviously. I'm a commercial vehicles and I buy this particular brand, brilliant. But they are bombarded. So what we've really done is tune that information, take all of that noise and put it into one place that they have got confidence that it's right. Is it the latest of this? Do I have to chase for this? Is there a meeting I need to be in place? And all those go to no. They're like, it's like they have the information they need in a consistent format with the dates and times that they know they want it on. And with lots of control, so they can be very specific around, actually, I'm working with this leasing company, so share this set of data with them, all by themselves. And I think that's time saving. And they're busy. and they're being pushed on cost. How do you be more efficient and effective? That's what we've done. We've helped them with a tool to do more with less time, so that when they are thinking about decisions, when they're walking into meetings, when they've got stakeholders on them asking them for new demands, they've got drivers on them for new requests, they have the place to go. They don't have to ferry through websites or inboxes to get it. And I think that's the benefit we've brought to fleet managers. They appreciate the effort in consolidation. Give me what I need in one place. And that's brilliant for a fleet manager. And what we've probably not lost, which has been really important to us, is brand differentiation still exists. So the way we've delivered the platform is the brand guidelines, the brand style, the brand voice, the information they want to share is bespoke to that brand. So we've made it easy for a fleet manager, one login, one place, but all the brands can just deliver exactly what they need in the way they do it. So,
and you kind of then take it and put it into the format that this thing needs, actually, because that's the other thing as well, that we know all of the OEMs will provide data in a format that's unique to that OEM. So having the middleware provider that then kind of goes, no, hang on a minute, that goes in that field, that's going to go in this field, and that goes in that page. It makes life so much easier. It's time saving, isn't it?
Yeah.
Game changing.
Massive time saving.
Yeah, brilliant. So Lloyd, thank you so much. We're going to stay here and carry on with the gear change episode in just a moment. So it'd be really good to try and get some of this crunched down into some key takeaways. But that was really fantastic episode. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today, and also talking about all the stuff that we're doing in corporate sales to help those corporate buyers decipher which models they should put on their policy and how you can start to support that process. So Lloyd Streton, thank you so much again for this main episode of the Drivetime Podcast.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much, Jacqui.
Thanks again to Lloyd Streton from ROI Automotive. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like, follow, and you'll never miss an episode of the Drivetime Podcast.